that is the reason why I was upset, because I realized that living in a low income environment surrounded by drugs and violence, even though I wasn't actually involved in certain things in my younger childhood, I still was affected by it. My body still remembered the gunshots. Welcome to the Uncommonly Peculiar podcast, the number one space for cultivating truth, love, and transparency with your girl, a voice and an influence. I am super excited to be here today, and I would like to start off this episode with a prayer. Heavenly Father, I just thank you. I thank you for this moment. I thank you for this opportunity. I thank you for being with me by my side through all of the journeys, through the perseverance, the overcoming adversity. I thank you just for never leaving my sight. So I would just like to bless this space. I like to bless everyone that will come on to the Uncommonly Peculiar podcast. I pray for the producers. I pray for the investors. I pray for everyone that will be a part of the growth and the healing of this space. So with that being said, in Jesus' name, I pray. Okay, welcome to the Uncommonly Peculiar podcast. Okay, so I want to start off with letting you guys know the purpose of this podcast. The purpose of this podcast is to bridge the gap between authenticity and humanity. I truly envision a place in a future where we as people can accept each other for who we are and not who we deem us to be. And so, with that being said, I just really want to focus on humanity and what that means, right? The quality of being kind, being thoughtful, and being sympathetic to others. Hence, we all have different experiences, right? And in our different experiences, that's what makes us authentic, right? When we're able to express our feelings, express our emotions, and allow people to be who they are. And that is exactly what we plan to do here on the Uncommonly Peculiar podcast. So, how we're going to do that? We're going to interview people from all walks of life, right? And the goal is to understand, not to be judgmental, but to understand their experiences, to understand why they think the way they think, what they believe, right? And then ultimately create a safe space for people to tell their story and live in their truth, right? So, with that being said, I would like to start off season 1, episode 1 with, shining some light on my background, also my experiences. This way, I lay a foundation so that you all can understand my perspective, right, of moving forward and understanding what I'm trying to create for the masses, for the next generation. It is our time to uplift the next generation and to show them and to tell them our truths and what we've learned so that we can create a safe world for us to be able to get along and also share the same spaces together. Okay, so let's talk about how I became a voice and an influence. So it's so interesting because the journey of being able to live into my truth and to be authentic, we all know that that starts early on. So it literally was in undergrad, right? And I was taking a psychology class. And on the first day of class, my professor posed the question. And she asked us, she said, what was the first two things that everyone was given when they entered into the world? Right? And everybody was saying all type of answers. So we were so far off. Everybody was given parents. Everybody was given doctors to deliver them. We were just so far off. So she had to give us two initials. And so she gave us the two initials. The first initial was a V, and then the other initial was an I. And so we came up with it, and it was a voice and an influence. So whether you realize it or not, your voice and your influence, whether you choose to use your voice for good or for bad, right? You're a voice and an influence. So after she took us through that, she posed us an assignment. She gave us an assignment, and the assignment was to create a plan of how we were going to give back to the community. And so, me and my teammates, it was myself and a group of three other people, we decided to focus on at risk teens and focus on giving them access, but also giving them information about the college experience. And so with that project, we got an A. And what was interesting about that is that my teacher came to me and she was like, Tykeesh, do you realize you orchestrated and facilitated this whole project? And the reason why she said that was because not only did I come up with a name, and our name was A Voice and an Influence. That was the title of our group project, A Voice and an Influence. And she knew that I came up with that. And so she also, just showed me and actually gave me that confidence that I needed to understand that I mattered. Because in that moment, even though I was in school for I wasn't in school for psychology. It was a psychology class. I actually was studying accounting, but you had to get your bachelor's degree, you had to take an elective, and I chose psychology. And so she just let me know that I had what it took, right? And sometimes we need that from people that we don't know. And she just shined a light on the process that I went through and all of the extra steps that I took. I actually knew someone who worked at a continuing education school, and I reached out to them and they gave me the contact information for the person who ran the school. And so me and my team members, a group and a voice and an influence, we went and we did a live presentation to the students, a live presentation. We also stopped at the enrollment department prior to doing our presentation to get some promotional products. So we gave them out to the students. And from there, we actually got 3 enrollments. 3 enrollments. So not only did I ace my assignment, I also allowed the university to get 3 enrollments. And so from there, the enrollment director approached me and he offered me a position in the admissions department. And at that point, I'm just blown away, right? So that opened up the door for that opportunity. And I began to work as an admission sales assistant. And my responsibilities were to greet the visitors. I gave tours of the university, and then to also work closely with the admission representatives with enrollment. And what's interesting about that is that once I began to work there, I actually landed my next position through that position because I checked in one of the managers who worked for the corporate office of Staples. I checked him in and he came to do a presentation to the students to let them know about the new B2B sales positions. And so I went in there and I listened to his presentation. And it's interesting because he told me that he thought that it was a joke because I was in the presentation. So he thought that our school like kind of set him up to kind of look at his presentation to see if he could come back. But actually I was really interested, so I filled out the application. And this was my first time that in order to get a job I had to do a PowerPoint in front of the manager and the regional manager. Okay. Talk about growth. Like I was just growing. And I didn't realize it back then that all of the steps that I was taking would literally be the catalyst for me to be here today. So I got that job and I began to work for Staples as the B2B sales representative. And so in that position, I was managing small, mid, and large companies by working with their decision makers to sign them up for the Staple Advantage program. And in that program, we had like a premium program, and everybody would be like really trying to stay away from the premium program because it was so hard to get companies under contract. But for some reason, I was signing them left and right, signing them left and right. And so I rose to the top quickly in that company, but that was really short lived because I ended up having to move on because at that time I had a daughter and it was just really, really hard to kind of manage like working in the field and also in the office and having to pick her up. And so this is where the beginning of my spiritual life started. I began to pray, like, and really try to understand like who I was as a person, because I'm like, Lord, I'm going to this job, but I don't think it's gonna last because I need to pick up my daughter from school and she's getting out at 12 o'clock. Like, how this gonna work? Okay. And then when you start making a little money, I know y'all know, like, daycare, all of that costs money. Okay. And I just couldn't balance it. So I started to pray, and God opened the door for me to get exactly what I wanted. And that was to work at a company where I could bring my daughter to work. Y'all, come on now. Tell me, God don't be working. I literally was able to bring my daughter to work with me. Okay. And so at that point, I was working, and I, was able to still work in sales and also work receiving commission. And what was interesting about that, I tried to stay away from commission, because it was just this fear I had. Like, if you work in commission, you ain't gonna really make no money. But I'm telling y'all, commission is where the money is at. Okay. Especially if you're able to connect with people. And I was able to connect with those decision makers and have them sign that contract. I hope you all are enjoying the show. But today's outfit is sponsored by Up Apparel. Head over to www.shopupapparel.online and check out the new Manifestation two-piece tracksuit. Okay, now head back over to the show. So from there, right, as I began to work as an executive account manager, I got to a point where I was just like, you know what? I'm tired of raising people's bottom line, right? And so this is where I began to become a voice and an influence, because through prayer, I began to think about what I was good at. What is it that fired me up? What in the inside made me want to wake up in the morning? And it was really, the foundation was helping people. Okay. So I had to get back to my authentic self, right? I had to get back to my authentic self. And so this is where I began to try to find myself, try to create myself. I joined social media as a voice and an influence. And from there, things really changed. Okay. And I want to kind of take a step back and give you guys a little bit of my background to let you guys know how I even got to college in the first place. Okay. So I was born in Oakland, California, Bay Area in the late 80s. Okay. And if anybody know about the late 80s, this was when drugs, incarceration, death was at its all-time high. Okay. And that was due to the AIDS and the crack epidemic, right? Like back then, it just AIDS and then crack, all of that came into our communities, and it just took us by storm, right? And so I lived in a low income neighborhood in Oakland. And at the time, Oakland was actually considered the high crime capital of the San Francisco Bay Area. And I shine a light on that because toxicity was really normal. Like it was just normal. So the things that I was experiencing, the drugs and the violence in my community that was, around in the community, it was normal to everybody. It was a thing of the community. But I had strict parents, and I wasn't raised in a two-parent home, but my mother was very strict. So she kept me really secluded from what was going on in our environment. And I like to shout out my auntie Tina, because she helped me understand my different talents that I had. And I was a child who was very talented at a very young age. So she cultivated dancing. And me and my cousin, we would dance. I also was a part of the oratorical fests. So I would say poems at national conventions. I competed against other high school students, and I actually won. And so I was involved in the arts heavily, really involved in the arts. I went to a performing arts school where I participated in choir, participated in hip hop dance, ballet. We also did photography. I act. So I did a lot, right, during my childhood. But there was a lot of things that was going on around me that I had no clue was actually going on. And I laugh at these things because as I got to high school, my reality just changed, because I was a child who was in the house watching Andy Griffin. Yes, I said, y'all said it, Andy Griffin. I was watching Matlock with my granny for social time. And then me and my friends, because we lived in this 12-foot floor, like high rise building, right? And on the floors it was 7 apartments, and so all of our my friends, we would go into the hallways and we would play, and we would play teacher. Of course I was the teacher all the time, and we would create clothing for our dolls. Like my mom, she would go to the Goodwill and get us clothing, and we would like literally knit skirts and shirts together to put on our dolls. So I really had a great upbringing. But as I mentioned, I was secluded from what was going on in my environment. Um, it was literally like hoods in my environment that I knew nothing about. So I grew up in West Oakland, the west part of Oakland. And then there was the East Oakland. I knew nothing about the East Oakland. It sounds so funny saying it now, but I literally knew nothing about East Oakland. I actually went to Cole Performing Arts, and literally 2 blocks down from Cole was another hood called the Lower Bottom. I knew nothing about the Lower Bottom. So that's how secluded I was, okay? But when I went to high school, Lord, my life changed so much. So I was, like I said, focused on performing arts, focused on intellect, okay? Matlock, he was a lawyer, okay? So just understand how my critical thinking was, okay? So literally first day, ninth grade, okay, I showed up to high school with a 2-piece jean suit skirt, okay, with leather boots to my knees, okay? Back then, bundles was not a thing, but your girl had bundles, okay? I had bundles already because my auntie actually did hair upstairs in her apartment, and everybody would go to her house to get their hair done. So I had my little bundles in, had the little burgundy tips with my hair flipped, okay? I'm talking about ninth grade, okay? So I get to class, I'm sitting in the front of the class, I'm ready to learn. My mind is focused. Here come the other students. They talking about me, they making jokes and everything. And at that time, I'm kind of just ignoring them because when I was in junior high school, I used to get bullied. I used to get kind of talked about because of my head. So people used to make fun of me because I had a big head, right? So when I got to high school, I kind of just overlooked it, right? Well, that was until they started trying to approach me, right? And I had to let them know I'm not the one nor the two. Okay. Like y'all not going to punk me. I'm not her. Okay. I had intellect, right? So I was sure to defend myself, right? But at that point, that is when my life changed because now I'm focused on defending myself. I'm no longer focused on my studies. I'm literally trying to be safe because now I have people targeting me, talking about me, trying to fight me. Okay. And so at that point, my life just changed. I began to get influenced. And as I began to get influenced, I mean, 12th grade, I'm like, ooh, I need to go to college. Okay. So now I'm trying to fill out applications for scholarships and I'm getting denied. Why? Because I was doing just enough to get by. I was no longer focused on my studies. So at that point, I lost sight of who I was. I literally lost sight of who I was. And because of that, it was really hard for me to find out who Tykeesh was. I had to go through many nights of crying, okay? Many nights of dealing with men who didn't appreciate me, and lowering my value just so that I can feel seen. And so as I left high school, I literally went to Job Corps, okay? Because I wasn't going to give up on myself just because, I was getting rejected from colleges and by scholarship. So I went to Job Corps, got me a little certificate, okay? Graduated in 6 months, got my first car, got my driver's license. And from there, I began to work at H&R Block. Began to work at H&R Block, and then I ended up having a baby, okay? And by that time, I was like, okay, I need to go to college because I need to make some money. And I went to college and got my associate's degree in accounting. I was going to have an accounting firm. Like my goal was to become a CPA. So that's how I got into like the whole numbers thing. So when I was in undergrad, I got my undergrad in business administration with an emphasis in accounting. Okay. And then once I began to work as an executive assistant, like I said, I got tired of raising people's bottom line. I got tired of making companies profit. So I just, really started asking God who I was. I started to peel back the layers of who I was. Okay. And from there, decided to say, what am I good at? And it was like, okay, well, you naturally are able to communicate. You're naturally able to inspire other people. So won't you just go to seminary school and be a pastor? Your girl was going to be a pastor, okay? That is funny to me because I actually did my whole little grad statement and everything, submitted my application to seminary school, y'all, and they declined me. They said, absolutely not, ma'am. I don't know why, but it's just funny to me because look at me here today, having a ministry to inspire the masses, okay, talking about the love of Jesus Christ, okay, like being a person that's still in ministry is amazing to me. So after I was rerouted, God was like, I want you to go this way, okay? I want you to go to social work. So that is how I made it to grad school. Okay. So made it to grad school studying social work. So if you guys don't know, MSW studies on human behavior and development to ultimately assist promoting social change while assisting development of the vulnerable population. And so in social work, this is where I really began to peel back a lot of the layers of my life because I began to understand who I was as a person. I took my first racism and oppression class at the age of 30. At the age of 30. And when I took that class, I was pissed off. Let's just be clear. Your girl was mad in there because I realized that the system knew more about me than I knew about myself. Like, even though I was I would consider like my upbringing to be a great upbringing because I had balance. Like, even though I grew up in an environment surrounded by drugs and violence, my father's side of the family, my auntie, she lived in a very nice suburban area in Hercules. So I would go out there as well. And I would be amongst a lot of people. I had Caucasian friends, I had Japanese friends, I had a variety of diverse friends when I would go to Hercules and I would be in their house, we'd be playing with their doll houses. So I had a balance. And that's very important because when you study social work, you learn about how the person and their environment influences their life, influences the decisions that they make. And so that is the reason why I was upset because I realized that living in a low income environment surrounded by drugs and violence, even though I wasn't actually like involved in certain things in my younger childhood, I still was affected by it. My body still remembered the gunshots that I would hear during New Year's Eve. My mom used to put us in a closet because they were going to start shooting soon the ball dropped. So we were literally in the closet, okay? When I tell you my mama didn't play, she was going to protect her children at all means necessary, by all means necessary, okay? So we were in the closet. But I still was affected by that. Okay. That still put a little bit of fear inside of me, right? That still stopped me from showing up being my authentic self, right? And so when I realized that the system had grouped a lot of different people in certain communities and withheld resources that ultimately affected them being influenced by drugs and violence and alcohol. And, people were influenced by a lot of perversion, and those things impacted the way you showed up, the way you are around other people. And those things were not at my my focal point. Like I didn't understand like my inability to be comfortable in a room with males was because of my environment, okay? How I was raised, okay? Because every time we would walk down the street, you'll hear men yelling at you, "Hey, hey, check it out, check it out, check it out, check it out." So that put fear in me to whereas I really didn't want to be around men like that. So I was one of those girls who was not really involved in a lot of the activity that was going on in the environment. Like I said, I was really focused on my studies and focused on the performing arts, but that didn't change. That didn't change me being influenced by it. And so as I continued to study social work, I started to be able to link different things that was going on in my life currently with how human development is. Understanding that it is important to have a secure attachment with your parents as you develop, because when you don't have that, that really affects how you deal with people as an adult. And so as I begin to continue to pull back those layers, I begin to allow the fear to to leave and to be able to be more confident in who I was in terms of my authenticity. Like, and this is the reason why the Uncommonly Peculiar podcast is going to focus on authenticity, because how you feel matters. What happened to you matters. But you can also use what has happened to you to make you a better person, to show you how you're connected to people who don't look like you, because we all have these different experiences. And so racism and oppression changed my life because I realized that the system had a huge influence on my behavior and how I viewed the world. Okay. And then my peers and my family and my friends, I just realized that they wasn't really informed because they wasn't focused on how their behavior was actually influencing their life. And this was important because now, because I'm aware of these things, now I have to protect myself, right? Because I want to continue to grow. And then when you want to help people, you cannot you cannot allow people's behavior to affect how you show up. And this is where boundaries came in, right? This is where all these different things had to come into play for me because ultimately I wanted to keep on growing, y'all. I just wanted to keep on growing. And so it was a new level of information of what I learned because that opened up my eyes. It opened up to my eyes to my influence. It opened up my eyes to how I could give back as a person to my community. And so as I sit here before you today, it is because I am humbly dedicated to helping the community, to helping myself in terms of continuously growing because I'm not perfect. I don't really believe that anybody will get to a place where they're like 100% healed. I think that is a myth, okay? Like the point is that we can manage. We can manage the things that we feel. We can manage the different stimuli that we have within our body. Okay. We can choose to respond versus react. Okay. And that is the goal here. Okay. And so that people can tell their story and so that we could be honest with one another. So I had to start being honest. Okay. Because let me tell you, your girl was judged by everybody. Okay. Like when social media hit the scene, that changed everything. And then look at me, I'm showing up as this a voice and an influence. So I feel like people that knew me, they like, who she thinks she is? Okay. She was just in a gang, okay, fighting people, okay, and now she a voice and an influence. So yes, okay. So that was a part of my development. I had to realize that just because people seen me the way that I was in the past didn't mean that I had to be stuck in that perception. I knew who I was. I knew what I had done to grow. Okay. I knew the steps that I had taken to become who I was. And the truth was, is that everything that I went through in the past was positioning me to be who I am today. And so when you go to my Instagram, you're going to see a variety of different facets of who I am. You're not going to just see the Thai quiche, okay? The motivational, passionate speaker. You're not going to see just the social worker. You're not going to see just the mother. You're not going to see just who you perceive me to be. You're going to see the dancer, the singer, the mother, the social worker, the evangelist, the speaker, because I'm a multifaceted person, okay? I like to say I am a spiritual being having a human experience. And this is why we're going to bridge the gap here on the Uncommonly Peculiar podcast of humanity and authenticity. Okay, when you think about humanity, like I mentioned before, that's about being kind to one another, right? And so we can't just look at people's lives, okay, look at their social media and think that we know who they are without actually sitting down and getting to know their story. So you will see a bunch of people, right? And you will have different perceptions for all of those people, but you won't truly know the person until you sit down and ask them the questions of how they got to where they are and why they think the way that they think. You'll be amazed at what you find out about that person. And that is what we plan to do here on the Uncommonly Peculiar podcast. And so when you think about this, right, the next generation, it is our responsibility to teach them. It is our responsibility to tell our stories, to live in our truth, authenticity, to be bold enough, to be courageous enough, to tell how we have become who we are today, to express our emotions, to validate their feelings. Because what I see too often is that people tend to focus on how someone conveys how they feel without validating it. Who am I to say that you shouldn't be angry? I can validate that. But that doesn't mean that I have to tolerate your behavior. It's a difference. Feelings are real and everybody has feelings. That's what makes us human. See, that's our humanity because we all feel, we all have a nervous system. We all have a nervous system and our memories are in our nervous system. So how we feel matters because you don't know who have been through what traumas, what traumatic experience. Like I said, I was raised in Oakland, California during the height, okay, of the crack epidemic, the AIDS epidemic. So there was so much violence, so much violence. So I had to unlearn a lot of behaviors, a lot of different behaviors to be the woman that I am here today, right? And so when I feel a certain way, I am entitled to that. But do I get to come around you being toxic? Absolutely not. Let's just make that clear. Okay. You can't just go around behaving the way you want to behave. Anyway, that's going to influence or affect someone else. This is the reason why you see people creating boundaries. It's not because they don't love their family. It's not because they don't love their friends. It's not because they may not even want to experience the rest of their life with you. They may even want to do life with you, but your behavior is toxic. And it's on you to change your behavior. It's on you. And at this big age, everybody say they standing on business. Everybody standing on business. I'm standing on business, right? So we got to stand on the choices that we make and choose to be authentic about how someone else made us feel and to understand that that may not be our intention in terms of the way that we behave, but be strong enough, be bold enough, and be mature enough to take accountability for your actions. Because when you take accountability for your actions, then you change your behavior. And when you change your behavior, then you put yourself in alignment with what God has created for you before the foundation of this world. And he said that he have come so that you may have life and so that you may have it abundantly. Right? So that you may have it abundantly. So in doing so, you have to be able to acknowledge when you have done wrong. When you have done wrong, it's so important that we just be honest with ourselves. Okay? Because if we're not honest with ourselves, right, then how can we expect the children that are coming up before us to be honest? How can we expect them to be honest? How can we expect them to live a life where we, as their parents, are at peace with knowing that when we leave this world, our children will be safe? and that they will continue to make us proud. We have so much work to do. We have so much work to do as a generation of people, and especially those who are born before social media hit the scenes. Okay? Before what, 2009, I believe? Maybe social media came out, maybe about 2006, right? Like, have you guys realized that we are the last generation of people who will know what the world looks like before social media came to the scene? Our children are growing up on their phones. Like when I was in high school, the cell phone had just came out. So we got to play in our communities. We got to experience what it was like for the whole family to come together for Thanksgiving. I know we had our little moments where they was, being toxic, but it was nothing like getting together for the holidays. That was a moment. So we get to recreate, we get to rebrand ourselves, we get to teach the younger generation how to be accepting of themselves, how to be authentic, and how to be in relationship with other humans. It hurts my heart to see mothers encouraging their children to fight other people. It hurts my heart to see that. Now, don't get me wrong. I know that you have to, protect your children. But at what point do we stand up to stop violence? At what point do we teach our children how to communicate? At what point do we say, I did that, you don't have to do that? Because this is what I've learned, right? And that is what the Uncommonly Peculiar podcast is for us to work it out together, for us to stand in our humanity and in our truths so that we can be a beacon of light for the next generation. So I am asking you all to really get in touch with yourself and understand why you do what you do. And is what you're doing, is that conducive to how you want your children to be when you leave this world? That's important. Every day I'm changing myself. Every day I'm working at myself because I have two children. I have a 3-year-old son and a 15-year-old daughter. I know your girl done started all the way over. But they challenge me each and every day to be a better person. And some days, right, I may not have it all together, but I have the capacity to sit down with my children and say, hey, mom's learning this with you. How does that make you feel when I behave this way? That's important because what you do in that moment is you create space to allow them to understand that them too have a voice and they are an influence. No matter if you see it or not, you are a voice and you are an influence. Whether you use your voice or your influence for good or bad, you are still impacting your spaces and the world. And so here on the Uncommonly Peculiar podcast, we're definitely going to bridge the gap between authenticity and humanity. Okay, so your girl is working out her authenticity by being true to who she is. Okay, and so this is a step forward for me and a step forward for all of us. Okay, so thank you for tuning in to season 1, episode 1 of the Uncommonly Peculiar podcast with your girl, A Voice and an Influence. Until next time, stay in peace and not in pieces.